Welcome to the ULI podcast series, recorded live at the Sea Change Summit in Barcelona, where we speak with our members, leaders at the forefront of decarbonisation and sustainability. In each episode, we dive into innovative solutions, explore challenges, and share insights that are shaping the future of our cities, industries, and communities. Join us as Daniel Chang, European Head of ESG at Hines, shares how connecting the dots across ESG can drive real progress and leadership in the industry. He highlights the power of standardization to create benchmarks and momentum, and explains how integrating physical and climate risks into underwriting ensures measurable value. By piloting transition risk guidelines, Daniel reveals how uncovering real risks reshapes strategies and strengthens action. He calls carbon pricing a crystal ball for future insights and stresses the need for collaboration, transparency, and owner-occupier engagement to achieve optimal outcomes. Daniel's message is clear. Innovation, unity, and leadership are essential to drive ESG forward.
I'm at the Sea Change Summit. I'm here with Daniel Chang, who is European Head of ESG at Hines. So Daniel, do you want to tell me a bit about your role at Hines with ESG? I mean, this is an important aspect of the company, isn't it? Increasingly so.
Absolutely, no, with pleasure. So my name is Daniel Chang, and I've been in this role for about 3 years now. I've been with Hines for 25 years. So actually, I've worn several different hats. I started out in development management and then went into investment management. So from my perspective, with that understanding of the business, it was a really nice opportunity to connect the dots and lead in ESG and really embed it into the business and into the different facets of our business. And so my remit is really to make sure that we are making progress with all the different aspects of ESG and really seeking to also create a leadership position in it.
Absolutely. I mean, decarbonisation particularly as one aspect of ESG, that's a huge challenge for the industry, isn't it? How do you think standardization on, for example, carbon pricing, do you think there's a big role for that in the industry?
I really do, actually. I think that there's an important role to make sure that we have a standardized approach to carbon pricing. And that's because, from my perspective, it helps to reveal the risks and opportunities in a more transparent way, to really start to establish a clearer link behind decarbonization and financial performance. And that's really what we're doing at Sea Change. And the important thing is to really demonstrate through that we're creating value so that we're creating momentum in the market and in the industry. And from my perspective, if we don't have that standardized approach, then there starts to be a blurry line between what the different assumptions are. But what we want is to make sure that people understand very clearly what we're doing so that they can compare, benchmark, and compare apples with apples. And so from my perspective, that's an imperative that we do have that standardized approach.
Absolutely. Do you think that, and that's across, I assume on a pan-European level, on a global level, at an overall built environment level, I suppose?
Absolutely. I think it's important. I know that there's always nuances between the different markets, but I think from an industry perspective, the different players in the market need to have sort of a way through which they're able to compare and benchmark so that in those transactions, we're all having that same understanding and moving forward in a consistent way and gain that momentum that we really need.
Sure. So when it comes to Hines' portfolio, how are you incorporating the physical risks of climate change into your decision making?
Yeah, no, that's really, really an interesting topic because it's something that people haven't really had on the radar as much as, for example, decarbonization. Okay. And more we're seeing that all around the world with more flooding events, more fires happening. And so it's really clear that we need to make sure that we are understanding that and underwriting that from the very beginning. And so at Hines, we have an investment committee that approves every single acquisition in our portfolio. And in order to go to the committee, we need to prepare an investment memorandum where there's a standard template on all sustainability risks and opportunities that includes a section on physical risks. And so as a firm, we are all making sure that we're reporting on what the projected physical risks are so that, again, we're really making sure that we're underwriting and understanding what they could be and making sure that they are part of the business plan.
Absolutely. I suppose, as well as the physical risks, there's the huge area of transition risks. Is that as equally as important in your decision making, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, transition risk for us is making sure that we're understanding where we stand with respect to stranding risks and ultimately obsolescence, which from our perspective is really intimately tied together with value. And we see that from a lot of our investors where they ask us, what is your stranding risk? Are you making sure that you're future-proofing your asset and really pushing out that stranding risk? So understanding the consumption of your building, translating that into carbon and benchmarking that is part of what we need to do to mitigate ultimately risks.
Absolutely. How do regulatory pressures fit into transition risks? Is that a key part of what you're looking at?
It is. I think, being in my role in Europe, where we see a lot of legislation that's been coming our way more and more, and not just in terms of penalties at an asset level, in terms of not complying with energy standards, but also in terms of disclosure. And it's not just what we need to do at our asset level, but also what we see our institutional investors asking us as investment managers, so that we can make sure that we can respond to them and really put them at ease that we are taking into consideration how we are mitigating those risks over time and getting ahead of them, so that if anything, we're preserving the value of the investments that they trust us with, but potentially even creating opportunities and value with them.
Do you think this is something the built environment needs to do better to work with policymakers and so on to make everything work together, I suppose, more seamlessly?
Yes, definitely. I think, we have an important role to play in the industry to be able to shape a lot of those different requirements. I think a lot of those requirements are oftentimes put in place sort of high level without really maybe understanding all the nuances of a particular industry. So from an industry perspective, to be able to help to inform what is important in real estate and specific, sometimes even to asset classes, really is important. So if there's a way that we can collaborate with helping to shape that, then absolutely.
So it's an important part of this sort of the Sea Change Summit is a good way to create the collective voice for the industry, I suppose, on that side.
Yes, absolutely. It's a great forum for that.
Still on transition risk, do you think there's a place for transition risk guidelines to help create a more unified approach?
Yes. So at Hines, we actually piloted the transition guidelines, and it was a really interesting process, I have to say. So we were part of the steering committee to be able to shape the transition guidelines, but then actually having to pilot it was even more revealing. I think as an industry, we all very clearly understand the costs of decarbonization and what those initiatives may be. But rarely do we then actually get to delve into what happens after they are in your cash flow in terms of how they impact our cash flow, both positively and negatively. But it's interesting to then play them out in terms of the impact on the OPEX and ultimately reducing OPEX and potentially improving net operating income, which from a value perspective then, gets multiplied with yield. And so creating value. And so it was a really great process to sort of break it down and start to think about it in that way rather than just think about decarbonization as a cost.
Was that on a specific asset or element of your portfolio?
It was on a specific asset. It was on a specific office asset in the Netherlands. And what was really great about the process was that we actually collaborated with one of our peers in the industry. And so worked hand in hand with our peer as they were doing or working through the pilot in their own portfolio. So we were able to sort of compare notes and sort of, work through whether we agreed or disagreed on some of the assumptions that we had made. And then following that, we actually made recommendations to Sea Change and ULI in terms of how to potentially fine tune some of those guidelines.
Oh, brilliant. Are there any, are you able to share any of the sort of headline lessons that you learned from that pilot? That might be.
Well, one of them was what I was mentioning earlier was that, for example, we had used a different projected carbon pricing standard.
Okay.
And so that had a huge impact on the outcome of how we were valuing things. And so that's kind of where my remark came from about seeking to have a standardized approach, because with just that one assumption, the whole output could be completely differently. And so if we hadn't sort of compared notes and understood that that's what we were doing, in a normal market, transaction, you'd have to really dive deep to understand that and then potentially sort of make assumptions that on that acquisition without really understanding what was underlying them. So that could really cause a lot of confusion.
I think I'm right in saying carbon pricing varies from sort of tens of dollars to hundreds of dollars, doesn't it? It's it's
especially when you project it into the future, it really becomes crystal ball.
yeah. And then when you talk about embodied carbon or carbon emissioned, I mean, goodness, it's a complicated one. So I suppose this could relate to that pilot. Do you think that do you think there needs to be a better relationship between the owners and occupiers to push the decarbonisation agenda forward?
Yes. Yes, I think it's so clear to me. So my role previous to this role was as a portfolio asset manager, so really working together with the asset managers. And it's clear that, just how important the occupiers are and the emissions that they have in our portfolio. So in one of our portfolios, it's a core fund. The scope 3 emissions come up to around 80 or north of 80% of your total portfolio's emissions. So clearly, needing to sort of collaborate and engage the occupiers and get aligned with them is crucial if, as a firm, you have a net zero commitment that includes scope 3. And so, being able to, even understand what their, goals are, what their objectives are, and work together with them, not just through, some of the tools and resources that we have like green leases, but really engage with them on an ongoing basis, understand with them, what their goals are, feedback to them the consumption that the building has, and engage with them on different CapEx measures and strategies for improving the building over time is crucial.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Daniel. I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. It's great to hear a bit more about what you're doing.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us in this insightful conversation. It's clear that tackling decarbonisation and driving sustainable change requires collaboration, innovation, and a unified vision. Together we can learn from diverse perspectives, share best practices, and take actionable steps towards a more resilient and sustainable future. Stay tuned for more episodes as we continue to explore how leaders across the industry are shaping the path forward.